Hey there. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm really glad you could join us. This, of course, is Exploring Awesome. I'm hypnotist Jim Kellner. And on each episode, I explore tips, tricks, and strategies to help you and me to live a more awesome life. Today, sharing his tips for living a more awesome life, I'm joined by my friend, my colleague, hypnotist Scott King. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Doing really well, man. Thanks. How are you?
I am doing great.
Doing a lot better, I'm guessing. Scott was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes at 405 pounds. He realized that the traditional diet advice that he was getting was not helping. He was kept gaining and losing the same 65 pounds over and over again, and which he finally did his own research. Do your research. He landed on the ketogenic diet along with fasting, and that has helped him to create transformation in his life. Scott, what happened? Tell us, give us your brief backstory before we dive into the real meat of of what you learned.
Well, so one day I woke up and I had some severe back pain, and I'd had kidney stones before, and I kind of felt like that might be what the case was this time. And it just kept getting worse throughout the day. So I ended up going to the doctor, and they put me in a CT scan and everything. And it turned out I actually had a slipped disc. But part of something else they did is they did a urine sample and some blood work and everything. And the doctor came back and told me I was most definitely diabetic, and that I actually had such high blood sugar that I was actually peeing the sugar out. It was that bad. And he had me told me I need to follow up with my general practitioner and everything. And so, of course, I did that. And they wanted to put me on a bunch of medicine. And I've never been a big fan of medicine. So I asked them if there's any way we could control it through any other means, diet and exercise, etc. And they said they could give it a try, but they really wanted me to go ahead and start the medicine because most people, by the time they're my size, don't have a lot of success with diet and exercise to control it. And mind you, at the time, like I said, I was 405 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they gave me some standard information, some printouts from a computer, of how to deal with type 2 diabetes, which I'm not a doctor, and I'm not saying that the American Diabetic Association is incorrect or anything, but the amount of carbs that they ask you to consume as a diabetic per meal is just going to further the illness along. Like everybody says that once you got type 2 diabetes, it's a progressive disease. It just gets worse. It never gets better. And through my own research, I found that is not, in fact, true. That if you do the right things, it can get better because it really is a lifestyle illness. And quite frankly, I did it to myself. I caused myself to get type 2 diabetes. And once I realized that and I'd done some research on it, my question was, how do I fix it? If it can be fixed, how does it get fixed?
So, and I'm not a doctor either. And I got to wonder about the American Diabetes Association because on the surface, it seems like what they're recommending is should be criminal because they're telling people who I call it a carb intolerance. It's just like somebody with a gluten intolerance. Somebody with diabetes just can't process that many carbohydrates, that much sugar, but they're telling them, no, go ahead and have some. But the other part is I sort of wonder if they do it because they think that people cannot control themselves. And so they're like, well, go ahead and have some because we know you're not going to be able to do it anyway. So either way, though, it's just a terrible, terrible way of doing this when you know what causes blood sugar to go up. It doesn't go up when you eat, moderate protein or when you eat fats. It goes up when you eat, carbohydrates. I mean, there's other things too. There's stress and the dawn effect and things like that. But primarily when it's food, it's carbohydrates, sugars. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Absolutely. I think that the theory is they want to maintain a steady blood sugar level, even if that blood sugar level is high. And that's why they recommend, 6 to 8 small meals a day and to have carbs steadily throughout the day. And all the advice does is progress the disease. It may slow that progression versus if you were just gorging, binging, and everything else, but it doesn't stop it in any way. It doesn't reverse it in any way. And we not 50 years ago, maybe they didn't know, but we know now that avoiding carbs and fasting will impact insulin levels significantly and lower them so that your body can go into fat burning mode. You can lose the weight, and that does reverse type 2 diabetes. And a lot of this has come out of this research has come out of the stomach alteration surgeries for weight loss, because that's what they do in an artificial means, is they prevent you from having the ability to consume as much food. And that naturally means you can't consume as many carbs. Therefore, your insulin gets lower. Therefore, you lose weight. And it starts to reverse the process.
That makes sense. It reminds me of, when I work with clients or something, and they'll talk about, well, I really want to have a piece of birthday cake. I can't believe I can never have cake again. And it's like, you know what? One piece of cake never caused anybody to get fat. It's not that one occasional piece that gives you diabetes. It's when you're eating the whole cake, when you're eating cake, all the time. And I think the real, it's like the tragedy of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and maybe to a certain extent type 1, but definitely type 2, is that the tragedy, but then the good side is you can control it. But this is two sides of it, because for a lot of people, they can get their blood sugars under control just by making lifestyle choices. But that also means that by not making lifestyle choices, it just gets worse. And like you said, there's if you want to just kind of, manage the disease, and that's what they call it managing your diabetes, then following the recommendations, is fine. But you're not going to get rid of it. It's going to progress. Like Scott said, it just progresses. So eventually you've got to take insulin. And so in addition to the oral meds, and then you've got to increase your insulin and keep going up and up. And pretty soon, eventually you lose a toe and then a foot, and you lose your eyesight and all these things. Whereas what we're talking about with what Scott's talking about is actually being able to, be basically symptom free. They may consider you still a diabetic just because you've got that label once, you've got it forever maybe, but you get rid of the symptoms, right? And that's really what's important. Scott, what were some of the things that you did when you made the transition?
Okay, so like I said, I follow a ketogenic diet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not always perfect. Obviously, I have some snacks every now and then, but if I consume carbohydrates, I try to consume any carbohydrates I'm going to consume in a block, and then not consume them for a significant period of time afterwards. Mm-hmm. So maybe every 2 weeks, I'll have a little extra carbs. I'll eat some grapes, whatever, have a little extra carbohydrate intake. I still don't go crazy with it. And then I cut them out. That way I can get that insulin back down, because the whole problem with type 2 diabetes is you have too much insulin. Right? And the only way that I know of to lower insulin levels is 1, don't consume carbohydrates, and 2, fast. If there is another way, I've yet to discover it. And as far as I know, no one else has either. I find that fasting is actually the best thing to control insulin levels. And I'm not, I always try to fast at least 16 hours a day. So I try to do that. So I only have an 8-hour eating window during the day, which is pretty easy for me to do. But then at least once or twice a month, I do a longer term fast of 3 to 5 the longest I've gone is 11 days. And I feel great when I do that. Like after about day 3, I get all this energy, and I just, my body is in that fat burning mode, and I've got all those great hormones that fasting increases, and it's just wonderful, and you also lose a lot of weight. And the losing of weight is important when you're trying to manage type 2 diabetes, because of something, I don't know if you're aware of this, Jim, because I just learned it about a month ago and I hadn't talked to you about it. But there's something called the 50% insulin problem.
Mm.
And what that is like, it doesn't matter who you are. 50% of your insulin that your body produces is not produced because of what you eat.
Mm.
Okay. And it's directly correlated to how much you weigh. That in and of itself isn't the worst part. The worst part is whatever you could consider that like a baseline insulin level. Okay. And whatever your consumption of carbohydrates above that baseline insulin levels, when you consume enough carbohydrates to cause your insulin to spike, it spikes up between 5 and 7 times whatever that baseline insulin level is. So this is why we get that slow creep, because as we get a few more pounds, we have a higher baseline insulin level. And once you've got that higher baseline insulin level, then you eat some more, your insulin spikes again, and slowly but surely you start to put on those 4, 5, 10 pounds a year. And next thing you know, it's a decade later and you're 100 pounds heavier. And that's what happened to me. I was at 20 years old, I weighed 200 pounds and then about 10 pounds a year for 20 years. And there I was at 405 pounds almost, and I found out that that's what causes that. It's that 50% insulin problem. And the only way to fix that problem, or the only way to address that problem, is through fasting. Because that artificially holds your insulin levels down. It allows you to lose weight. And then because it's artificially held down, whenever you do eat, it doesn't spike as much.
Wow, that's interesting. I think this is a good point to maybe make here. And I know I'm going to get maybe in trouble with the people that there's a whole group of folks out there that are very much size positive. Hey, it doesn't matter how much you weigh. You should, love yourself anyway. And I'm all for that. You should love yourself no matter what. That has nothing to do with your size. But there's this idea that you can be just as healthy being overweight. And I think, there's always going to be outliers. I remember one time I worked with a client. She was in her 70s. She had smoked her entire life. And she says she drank, not a lot, but she said, she admitted that she drinks too much sometimes. Didn't really care about it and didn't really eat that healthy of a diet. But she had no problems with cholesterol. She had no heart. There was nothing in her family. They all lived to be 100. She got those magic genes. You know what I mean? And there are some people out there that will get the magic genes. And it seems like no matter what you do, you're going to be fine. But for the rest of us, for the majority of folks out there, there is this idea of being overweight and healthy. You might be somewhat healthy, but I just don't think you can be as healthy as you can be when you're at a healthy weight. And that doesn't mean you have to go by the BMI numbers that the government says, but somewhere in a reasonable weight, and we kind of all know what that is for ourselves, and it's just so concerning because I understand where it comes from. I want to feel good about myself no matter how much I weigh. That's fine, but don't try to fool yourself into saying that you're going to be as healthy as you would be if you weighed less.
And part of that whole problem is we've all been lied to about what being healthy is. Like, you ask a normal person, is it healthy to fast?
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to tell you, no, you need to eat. You need to eat 4, 5, 6 times a day.
6 times a day. Got to have my snack.
Yeah. And it's just not true. We've all been lied to about that. It's actually a very unhealthy way to eat. It's not based in evolution, and it's not based in science.
If you think about early humans, number one, you couldn't store food very well. So how did early humans walk around with lug around all this food that they were going to eat 6 times a day? I mean,
they did it.
Technically,
as simple as that. We did not evolve to be grazers.
Right.
We evolved to be hunters and gatherers, and sure, we might have had some food here and there, but it wasn't very much. And then we had a feast, and that's how human beings lived for, millions of years through our evolution. And that's how many other primates live too. And they don't have that problem.
Many tribal cultures too, some of the indigenous folks that we still, there aren't as many tribes anymore, but it's like you go out, you hunt, maybe takes you several hours, even a day to to finally capture yourself a big old wildebeest, and then the whole tribe feasts, like Scott said, and then you may go a few days again before you capture another wildebeest, or
And that's
maybe
that's one of the
graze a little.
reasons why I believe that's why whenever you do a long-term fast, your energy levels increase dramatically, because that's evolution saying this guy needs energy to go hunt.
Right.
He needs to go hunt. So it gives you the energy to do so. And
Right.
that's another great thing about fasting is fasting actually increases your metabolism. Whereas calorie restriction to lose weight always decreases your metabolism over time. And that's what I was suffering from. I would diet and I would lose 40, 50, 60 pounds. And then my body would just keep telling me, no, you got to eat, you got to eat, you got to eat. I was hungry all the time because I wasn't going completely without food. See,
Yeah.
when you fast, sure, there comes a point when you first start where, yeah, you feel hungry and you're like, man, I can really eat. But if you just let that pass, it takes a couple of hours, let that pass, then the next day it'll come back around, but you won't feel as hungry. The need won't be as bad because the hormones aren't as high. And then by the third day or so, I'm not even hungry anymore. Like I don't like if somebody else is eating, I'll get that food FOMO, fear of missing out, because someone else in the tribe is eating and I'm
Right.
not. But I don't get, if I'm not around food, if I don't smell food, I don't get hungry. That's another thing I noticed. After about 5 days of fasting, my sense of smell is like amazing. I can smell like you wouldn't believe, and I think that's the same thing. I think that's an evolutionary thing.
Where it's like wildebeest.
you need to be able to hunt, But no, so with the fasting, all of my blood work, like across the board, improved. Like I expected it. Okay, I'm going to be doing some long-term fasting. I expected my blood sugar to go down some. And I took over a full point off of my A1C in a 6-week time period from when so it was back in November. I went to the doctor, got my blood work, and I don't remember the exact number, but 6 weeks later I went back and I had done an 11-day fast and a couple of 5-day fasts during that 6 weeks. And my A1C was down like 1.2 points. And it wasn't at that time, it wasn't quite out of what they call diabetic, but it was significantly improved with no meds of any kind, just fasting. That's all I did.
And this will be a great point to just throw out there. If anybody wants to comment, have questions or anything for myself or for Scott, please drop them in the chat. I don't always see them during the program, but we will get back to you afterwards if not. I want to say something real quick too. When we talk about fasting and keto, I need to let you know, if you have any kind of health concerns, if you have diabetes and stuff, it's probably best that you check with a doctor before you start this.
Especially type 1.
Yeah, type 1, yeah.
And that's have to have a doctor's supervision.
And that's a tough one, because I do have people with type 1 all the time telling me, oh, I can't fast or I can't do keto because my doctor said, because I have type 1 diabetes. And I'm like, I kind of have to grip my teeth and go, okay, maybe you should talk to a different doctor.
And that's absolutely, like, if you have type 1 diabetes, you need to find a doctor who will help you lose weight.
Yeah.
But at the same time, your problem isn't the same thing as a type 2 diabetic.
Right.
Okay. You can't fast. Like a type 1 diabetic can have serious health complications if they do a long-term fast. Okay. But no doctor is going to tell even a type 1 diabetic, no, you have to wake up in the middle of the night to eat. You can't go 8 hours without food. Of course you can go 8 hours without food. You can probably go 24 hours without food. I highly recommend you do not go 11 days like I did without food. That will probably kill a type 1 diabetic. I'm not a doctor. I don't know that for certain, but there are complications with type 1 diabetes. It's a completely different illness.
It is. But when we're talking about type 2 diabetes, it is something where you need to be concerned. Because and here's the thing too, so the flip side of with the ADA and the recommendations for carbohydrates, it could be too that they just don't want, like Scott says, they want your blood sugar, even if it's high, to be at a stable point, because you won't die. You probably won't die in the short term from high blood sugar, but you can definitely die in the short term from low blood sugar. If your blood sugar goes too low, you can die. You will. Mine was down to 47, I believe it was one time, and I literally felt like I was going to die. I really felt like I was going to die.
Anytime I'm fasting, I monitor my blood sugar about every 2 hours while I'm awake. And anytime it gets below about 62, that's my cue. Whether I thought I was going to fast longer or not, it's time to eat something. Okay. I don't have to eat a lot. I can eat a little bit, then get back into the fast. But if it gets below, because you don't want your blood sugar to go below 60, that's where serious health problems start to come in. And you'll just feel terrible anyways.
Yeah, I felt just awful.
Yeah. That being said, I've only ever had that happen one time, and it was about 9 days into a fast, and I had done a significant amount of physical activity that day. My blood sugar dipped down for a little while. I had a little bit of food, and it went back up, no problem. But yeah, you got to monitor those things.
A couple of things. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Jim.
I just want to say, a couple of things. So when you're, especially for diabetics, but I think it's going to probably happen to other people too, but definitely with diabetics is what I've found is that a diabetic will have kind of a norm. And so you may feel fine at 120, say your blood sugar is 120. The norm should be anywhere between about, they'll say anywhere between about 70 and maybe, if maybe on the high end, maybe 110 after a meal or something, but normally, maybe, 70 to 100 or something like that. But if you're a diabetic and you're used to being at 120, 130, 140, if you get down to 90 even, you can feel like you're going to die. You can feel like your blood sugar is too low. And it's kind of a false flag type of a thing. It's just not what your body's used to. So definitely pay attention to it, but that's not the kind of thing we're talking about. We're talking about when it gets really low. And definitely, if you're feeling really awful, you should eat something. There's a difference. And Scott, I want to talk about this a little bit because there's so many myths about, like you touched on, I remember back in was it the 90s when, we were supposed to there was all the experts were eat as soon as you get out of bed, eat every 2 hours. You got to have your snacks. You got to be, have your bedtime meal and all this stuff. And so people have this idea now that people will always pop off, oh, that fasting, that's going to kill you. But they haven't done any kind of research. And they think they can't do it because maybe they skipped a meal once and they got really hungry. They got hangry. You get that, oh my God, I'm going to die. You get irritable and you feel like you're going to die. But can you just talk about what it's really like when you get used to fasting?
Well, I think that especially that hangry issue, the easiest way to deal with that is do ketogenic diet first. Because if you're in ketosis, it makes fasting easier.
It does.
If you're fat adapted already, and the larger you are, larger people are more fat adapted anyway. So the more weight you have to lose, the easier it's going to be to do keto and lose weight and to do fasting and lose weight, because that's just how the body works. But yeah, I definitely think that the easiest thing to do is to be ketogenic first. So if I'm planning to do a long fast, like 5 or more days, that's what I consider a long fast. And anytime you do a fast longer than 5 days, you need to really understand what you're doing, because you have to break it in a very specific way to avoid something called refeeding syndrome, which can cause you to have a heart attack. It's easy to do if you know what you're doing, but you got to figure out how you're doing that first. Most people don't need to do a longer fast than 5 days anyways. But anyways, as I was saying, you got to break that fast in a specific way. But just your normal fasting, just don't gorge when you get done. Eat a small meal, and then a couple hours later, eat like a half a meal, and then eat a regular meal. But before you start fasting, things that help me is 1, being ketogenic, and 2, for about 2 days before I start a long fast, I will do what's called a fat fast, which means not only will I will go for basically 0 carbohydrates for a couple of days, and I will only eat, avocado, bacon, stuff like that. That's really high fat, almost no protein. just trying to aim for nothing but fat so that my body is fat adapted. And in that process, before I go into a fasting mode, because it just makes the transition easier. It lessens the hunger pains. Like I find that if I have there's no way I'm fasting the day after a cheat day where I eat some carbs. Like it's just not happening.
It's painful.
Like
it's gonna be really painful. It really is.
Yeah.
It's gonna hurt. You're gonna be starving. You're gonna feel like crap.
Yeah, you're gonna feel like crap. So I make sure that I'm in keto before I fast. Just makes things easier.
And talk about that, when you start fasting, everybody, and this was me too. I'm not, I understand. When I first heard about fasting, I thought it was BS. I was like, oh, this is crazy. It's a new fad, and this, I can't fast. I can't skip a meal or two. That I get so hungry. But can you talk about how you actually feel? And this is, I've talked to a lot of people that do fasting. Now, some people, for whatever reason, they just can't seem to get their head around it, whatever. But for most of us, tell what the experience was like, Scott.
Well, so
do you have low energy? Do you feel terrible? I mean, what happens? When
I fast, I don't have low energy because, like I said, I'm already in keto. Like if I try to fast after a day where I eat 100 carbs or so, it's difficult to start a fast. But if I'm already in ketogenic, I'm already in ketosis, and I start a fast, then about 20 hours into the fast, I find I get hungry. And so I just try to time my fast so that I'm going to sleep about 18 or 19 hours in, and I sleep through the part where I'm hungry, and then I wake up and I feel great. I actually have more energy when I'm fasting, especially when I hit about day 3, man. I don't know. It's like in the middle of the night. I don't know, the cocaine fairy comes and dusts me or something. And I wake up on that 3rd day about 72 hours in, and I'm just like, I am ready to go. And it's a super productive day usually.
I find such, and this is just a reminder, I haven't fasted for a little while, more than about 16 hours. I need to do another 2 or 3 day, because it really is one of the best feelings in the world. I mean, really, I can remember there was a time when I was in Phoenix, and I was working an event. I was on my feet. So I was on my feet for like 12 or 13 hours, but I was fasting then. And it wasn't great timing, but I said, whatever. And I can remember one time I got off and I didn't have my car. I went down there to do a gig, and I was going to call Uber, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to walk. It was about 2 miles. I said, I'm just going to walk. It's a nice night. And I couldn't even help myself. After about a quarter of a mile, I started jogging. And I'm telling myself, how can you be jogging? You were on your feet for 12 hours in the Phoenix sun, and you're jogging now. And I had no food for like 2 or 3 days at that point. It's amazing, absolutely. People, when you get, and when he's talking about this fat adapted, you're actually using the fat that's on your body. And even the thinnest person, because sometimes people will be like, well, I'm not really heavy. Can I fast? The thinnest person still has 10 or 20 pounds of fat in their body. And for every pound, you've got, 3,200 calories there?
3,500, I believe.
3,500 calories that you've got for energy. So you're talking about, that's a lot of energy, guys.
This is why like long distance, like super long distance swimmers, they bulk up before a long swim. And when I say long distance swimmer, I'm talking the channel, the English Channel. I'm talking hundreds of miles. These guys will put on 40 pounds of extra fat before they start that. And then by the time they get done, they will literally swim off 25 pounds in one of those swims, because once that energy kicks in, once your body goes into that mode, man, it's like an unlimited fuel source almost, especially in my case, when I was 405 pounds, that's a whole lot of energy that's just waiting to be burned up.
It is. Yeah. And, like Scott was talking about too, I'd love to talk about, if you're out there and you just wanted to start this, you want to find out what it's like, you don't have to go with a 2 or 3 day. I would recommend that you do like maybe a 16-hour fast. And that really is just where you don't eat after maybe, 6 or something at night. And then you don't eat until noon the next day or something like that.
That used to be standard practice in pretty much all of Western culture. We went about 16 hours. That was just what people did. They went to work. They worked all day, and they didn't take a lunch. They didn't take 2 15-minute breaks where they ate a snack. They just ate supper when they got home. And that's what a vast majority of people did. And we were all lot healthier than physically speaking.
Oh, if you ever watch an old film reel from like in the black and white days, especially early films, 20s, 30s, you won't see a fat person. There are literally zero people that don't look actually really thin, that we go, oh my God, they're too thin. They need to eat something. They're all super thin. It's amazing.
And part of that is we're a victim of our own success.
We are. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-oh. I may have lost Scott. Like he's saying, we're a victim of our own success. There was a time when people didn't eat like this unless they were royalty or something. There he is, victim of our own success, he said. Yeah.
And yeah, that's exactly what I was saying until modern times, people couldn't just consume 12,000 calories a day. A single 32-ounce soda has something like 2,800 calories in it. It's insane.
What's funny too? I was my wife and I were at this Asian market, and they have one of these. They have a little restaurant there that makes their own sweet drinks, and they use sugarcane. They use actual sugarcane. So if you look at it, it was awesome to see. They take this big, huge stock. If you go look at a sugarcane, people, if you've never seen one, look it up. It looks like a big piece of wood, and they put it in this machine that extracts all the sugar. And so we couldn't eat that much sugar before. We just couldn't. You'd be gnawing on this thing all day long and maybe get 100 calories.
Until the Industrial Revolution. Yeah, sure. There was times when people gorged on food. There was harvest time. People would have a big meal usually then. When the fruit harvest came in, you would eat a lot. But you can sit down and drink a 32-ounce soda like it's nothing. It's nothing to do that. To get the same number of calories because you ate apples because it was apple harvest time, you'd have to eat so many apples, you'd be dying. You'd be so stuffed you wouldn't know what to do. It's like it was a totally different thing. Even when our ancestors gorged on food, because they did that, it was still never in the quantities that we're capable of consuming now.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up. I remember somebody just recently had posted I put up something about keto, and I'll just and a short aside. As summer approaches, I feel a little bit of a calling to eat more fruit. I think that's an instinct within us that that it starts to get sunny, the fruit starts coming out, and we start craving those sweet things. But somebody commented that said, I fail to see how a diet that says you can't eat an apple could be healthy. And the problem is, the apples that we're eating today are not the apples that our ancestors ate. If you want to eat crab apples, you go right ahead. Go find yourself a wild crab apple tree and eat 2 or 3 of them.
Absolutely.
You're not going to want to have any more.
Even apples. I happen to do a lot of work in horticulture and everything. And the modern apple only really got bred into existence about 5,000 years ago. Before that, you're right. Everything was basically crab apples, and go ahead, eat 50 of them. Okay, you ain't gonna do it.
You'll be crapping yourself all day anyway, so you won't be able to hold on to it. But that's the thing, that we just didn't have the opportunity. So, if these people that are like, well, I have to eat my fruits because that's healthy. Well, go back and eat the fruits that your ancestors ate.
Well, they're absolutely right. It is healthy to eat the fruits. And if you've got fruit trees and it's harvest time, eat 20 apples. Eat a bunch of apples while you can. But if you're going to the store in the middle of January in New York City and you're buying 5 pounds of apple and eating that, no, your ancestors couldn't do that.
Or eating pineapples if you're not living in Hawaii or one of the Polynesian areas, bananas. You
had to preserve food, and that's only even been around for 1,000 years in any real capacity. Before that, you ate what was available when it was available.
And like you said,
how did we store food 10,000 years ago? Right. Simple. We did it with animals. The animals ate the calories throughout the year, and when it was cold, we killed them and we ate them. That's what happened.
And like you said, we did certainly, if you found a honeycomb, you gorged on it. If
Yeah.
you during the harvest season, you might go find a bunch of berries and gorge on it. We just didn't have it available all the time, and that's what we have now. We every single night we can have ice cream, we can have potato chips, and we can wake up and have Pop-Tarts. We just didn't do that.
Yeah.
There's never a time in our history before at least 100, 200, 300 years ago that we did that.
Yeah, the closest thing that we ever came to being able to gorge on the calories that we do now, in a continuing sense, was probably about 20,000 years ago when we invented beer.
Right.
But before that, like that's the closest you can get. Before you get to fermentation, we had no way to store food. So you ate what was available when it was available, and sure, you gorged when you could, but it was always a temporary thing.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't understand. Our bodies just weren't designed to handle 2 big gulps and 4 bagels in the morning, and a big hearty steak for lunch, and then fried food for supper. Don't get me wrong, I love my chicken fried steak, but you can't eat it every day.
And that's and the other thing too is go back and there's a great show on History Channel right now. There's a series on something like The Food That Built America or something like that. And I love this program for a lot of reasons. Great. If you're an entrepreneur, go watch it, because you'll see how these people just persisted to finally get it done. But, before Kellogg's and came along and Post cereals and things like that, people were eating just regular food in the morning. They weren't eating grains. They weren't eating sugars. They were eating what they had, basically leftovers from the night before, or they were skipping it. And with the invention, of these breakfast cereals, and then eventually, they started off as maybe healthier, but then they started adding sugar to them, and pretty soon you've got more sugar in there than you have in a big gulp, and so they just became so unhealthy. We've been just lied to by these food companies who really they're just trying to make a buck, they don't have our best interest at heart. I want to invite you to, if you're watching this right now, please join my Facebook group. It's facebook.com/groups/healthy living the mental game. Nice long title for you. Go join the group. We have we have contests in there for health and wellness. Also, if you want to try hypnosis, go to my website, get the free hypnosis download. That's up on the screen right now if you're watching the video. If you're watching later on Anchor or Apple or anywhere else, please give us a review, and you can get a free hypnosis download by going to jimkellnerhypnotist.com/free-hypnosis. Scott, we got to get out of here, but before we go, can you give us, in closing, 3 things that I and my audience can do to live a more healthy life, a more awesome life?
Hey, my number one recommendation is put more time between your consumption of calories. Whatever you're doing now, if you're doing 8 hours of sleep and then you eat, try to do 10, and then just keep trying to stretch that out so that you have more and more time of not eating between the times when you're eating. The second thing is find activities that make you move, that you enjoy doing. I don't intentionally exercise very often, but I work. I've got a garden. I've got a big piece of property. I'm always shoveling something or hauling something in a wheelbarrow. That's the kind of physical activity I think people need, not going to the gym and lifting weights. And aside from that, drink plenty of water and get sleep. Sleep is one of the best things you can do for your health.
Honestly, I think it's the most important thing we can do for our health. Everything I've seen, I really do think it's the number one thing. In fact, if I'm working with a client who can't lose weight, my go-to is, are you sleeping? And, if you go see a sleep specialist, people are like, oh, I don't want to wear a CPAP machine, whatever. Figure out something. If it's going to help you to sleep, use the damn thing.
Go ahead. My grandfather always used to tell me, you can only work on one end of sleep. You have to get up when you have to get up. Whether that's an alarm clock or your body is just going to wake up at a certain time. So you can only work on the other end of it. So go to bed earlier.
And I think that's so, and I keep, I just had to make a deal with myself today. I just decided I had to make a deal with myself. No more. I can't do any social media at night before bed, because this is what I was doing. I'm doing, I'm just going to check things before I go to bed. I started reading at bedtime, but I'm like, well, I'm just going to check a couple of things. before I go to sleep. And next thing you know, I'm too tired to read because it's been an hour later because I got stuck on TikTok. And I think TikTok is for me the most addictive. So I can't. So it's like, no, I can do TikTok on the couch. I can't do it in bed. So I think that's such a great point. And really, and I just saw actually it was on TikTok, but a scientist talking about it. If you're not sleeping well, your body is not going to be able to release weight like it would otherwise. The stress hormones are getting involved and all that. So what a great point. Good stuff here.
If you're having trouble sleeping, my recommendation would be don't look at a screen for at least an hour before you plan to go to bed and watch the sunset. The light rays coming in your eyes because of a sunset trigger your body that it's bedtime. It's time to go to sleep.
That's great advice. Yeah. I mean, and just another great example of doing what our ancestors did. You know, our ancestors watched the sunset. They had nothing else to do. They're sitting around after dinner.
They certainly weren't up until midnight because they didn't have any light. When the sun went down, they did too.
Right. You know? They were probably sleeping a lot more than we are.
They probably slept a lot more in the winter, at least.
Yeah.
You know? And in the summertime, they probably slept less.
Yeah. And you know, that's another thing too, is like we kind of live our lives as if the seasons don't matter. If, you know, as if, you know, we can just sort of artificially create whatever kind of, you know, living environment we want without remembering that we have all these cues from nature that we've been using for millennia.
And yet we still have concepts like spring fever.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
Where because we want to get out and move. It's like, that's nature telling you it's time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You've done your hibernating. It's time to get up and move and go find some fruit. So really great stuff from Scott today. So you know, as I always say, everybody, it's super hard. If you're watching this right now and you're going, man, I really want to make a change in my life. It's pretty tough to do more than one or two things at a time. So what I recommend is you write these things down and choose one of them to do starting today. And so the recommendations that Scott gave us were put a little more time in between the consumption of food. So if you're going like 2 hours right now, maybe go to 3 hours and then 4 hours. And trust me, you know, both Scott and I, and a lot of my clients have discovered it gets easier. It really does. I've got a friend right now that took off 60 pounds in a year just by eating one meal a day. He ate whatever he wanted during that one meal, but just one meal a day. But, you know, if you can push yourself to eat, not eat until noon, and then you stop eating at 8, you'll get 16 hours of a fast in. And it's pretty darn easy. So more time between consumption, move more. You know, I think really for me, it's sleep and then movement are the two most important things we can do for our health practically. And then water and get more sleep. Such good stuff. Thank you for joining me today, Scott.
No problem, Jim. It was great seeing you.
Awesome. So everybody out there, just want to remind you, you're listening or watching Exploring Awesome. You can listen every month, and I'm always talking to guests who are helping me and you to live a more awesome life. That's all we have for today. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Take care. Be well. Be awesome.